Everybody, for our first Idea Exchange webinar. This is a new initiative that AROHE is undertaking because we only are able to sponsor conferences twice a year, and we wanted to have more opportunities for people to interact with one another, share ideas, and learn resources that AROHE has to share. So first, let me tell you just a little bit about why we chose this topic. We often hear from retiree organizations and for retirees, individual retirees on campuses, that they don't feel recognized by their campus, that they don't feel like their universities value what they bring to the campus, that they have difficulty getting recognition, funding for or support for their initiatives. And so we chose this as our first topic because it's a common issue that we hear. So first, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Sue Barnes. I am recently retired as of July 1st, but before I retired, I worked for 23 years for the University of California, Davis. For the last 7 years, I was the director of the Retiree Center there. And then for the last 3 years of my career, I was the director of the UCLA Emeriti and Retirees Relations Center. And during the last 10 years, I have been involved actively with AROHE. I'm a past president, and I'm currently serving as the interim executive director. Joining me today is Bill Verdini. He is a past president of the Arizona State University Emeritus College, and he's co-hosting today. So during the webinar, at different times, I will be asking if you have ideas to share. We will be doing that via the chat feature. So we'll be asking you to, at certain times, to type into the chat, I have an idea to share, or I have a question, and then Bill will be unmuting people one at a time to share their ideas or to ask their questions. Now, given our time constraints and the number of people involved in the webinar, we may not be able to get to everybody, but we will try to get to as many people as we can. And then I will be sharing some options to share this conversation after the webinar via our discussion forum if we don't get to hear from everyone.
Sue, just one quick comment. Thanks to Susan making note that when you type in the chat, you have to hit the enter button to actually send the chat out. That's.
Oh, great. Yes. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Susan. Okay, for those who aren't as familiar with AROHE, I just wanted to share our mission statement. We are a dynamic member network that includes retirement organizations, associations, retiree centers, and emeriti centers, campus offices that support all phases of faculty and staff retirement, including human resources, academic affairs, and advancement development, and individual academic retirees. AROHE provides resources and connections to enhance retirees' significant achievements and contributions to their campuses, communities, and professions. And before we get started, I want to share the agenda. I'm first going to be providing a very brief overview of retirement organizations, just to make sure we're all on the same page, because everybody has different levels of experience and knowledge around retirement organizations. So I want to make sure when I say something about an organization, we all know what I'm referring to. Then we're going to be talking about our 5 greatest keys to success and inviting everyone to exchange ideas. Okay. So before I start in with the 5 keys, I want to give you an overview of engagement with retired faculty and staff. And it really falls on a continuum from just a small amount of engagement that doesn't cost the university a lot of time or money, all the way up to a large amount of engagement, which generally requires more funding and more of a time commitment. So at the beginning of the continuum, campuses start to involve retirees in existing programs or initiatives. This often happens through the Human Resources Department or through Academic Affairs or through the Alumni Association. And it really is just identifying who the retirees are and inviting them to be a part of campus events. Next on the continuum generally is that there will be an increase in retiree privileges or programs. So for example, retirees may get reduced or free parking on the campus. They may be invited to have discounts at the bookstore, or they may have library privileges, or be able to continue their email addresses, things of that nature. And then the last two on the continuum is really where AROHE fits in to help retirees and their campuses create retirement organizations. And there's really two distinct types of organizations. And the first is a retired faculty or staff association. And associations are independent organizations, and I'll talk about those just a little bit more in a minute, that are separate from the university, similar to an alumni association. And then at the highest level, this last level typically requires a fairly significant amount of university funding and staff resources, and that is to establish a retiree or emeriti center or an emeriti college. One thing I will mention, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, is that we do offer some written materials that are called our AROHE briefs, and those go into a little more detail about the types of organizations, and we have briefs on other topics as well. So I'll be going into that a little bit later in the presentation. The three different main retirement organization types, as I mentioned, are associations, retiree centers, and emeriti colleges. So I created this slide just to outline the basic differences between the three types of organizations. Now, this isn't an exact science, because associations and centers and colleges are different on every campus. They go by different types of names. They have different missions and goals. But in general, associations are independent, like alumni associations, as I mentioned. They advocate for retirees, benefits and privileges, and they plan activities. They usually serve their members, and they're usually primarily dues funded. A retiree center is an official campus department funded by the university with career staff, maybe part-time, maybe full-time. Their primary goal is to connect all retirees to the campus. They don't just serve members, they serve all retirees, and they are primarily campus funded. An emeriti college, they go by different names. Sometimes it's an emeriti academy, but they are a department as well, but they fall under academic affairs. They're an academic department, generally under the provost or the academic affairs department. They have more of a scholarship and research focus. They usually serve retired faculty, although they often invite a larger community to events. And they usually have some sort of hybrid funding, and I'll talk a little bit more about funding in a moment. So talking about funding, show me the money. What are the sources of funding for these types of organizations? And I mentioned a little bit about campus funding that is generally primary for centers and colleges, and dues, which are generally primary for associations. But many organizations have a significant amount of revenue from other sources as well. They may sponsor events or services that they charge for. They may have partnerships or sponsorships, both with campus departments or community organizations or businesses. For example, many retirement organizations have very successful partnerships with retirement communities, with the communities providing support either in kind or actual financial donations in exchange for the association giving them perhaps information tables at their events, or emails explaining what their community offers, things like that. Dues we talked about. Associations sometimes will contribute to centers and colleges, and then many organizations do fundraising as a source of funding. So at this point, I want to just pause and see if anyone has questions or needs any kind of clarification about the types of organizations or funding sources. And if you could just type into the chat. I'm not viewing the chat while I'm doing the presentation, but Bill is. So if you have a question, please type in the chat and Bill will unmute you. And if not, we'll move on.
I don't see any questions or comments yet.
Okay, great. Then let's talk about our top 5. What are our top 5 keys to success? And these tips have come about. AROHE has been in existence since the early 2000s, and they've come about from all of our work with organizations around this issue of demonstrating retiree value. And there's one particular overriding theme that I want everyone to keep in mind before we talk about our top 5, and that is I ask you to tune in to your campus's radio station. And you see radio station is in quotations because WIIFM is not a real station. But for those who are familiar with marketing terms, WIIFM stands for What's in It for Me. As you're thinking about how to demonstrate value for retirees, what we want you to keep in mind is that colleges and universities will not generally provide funding or staff support for retirees because it's good for the retirees. They will do it because it's good for the campus. So when you're asking whether it be for increased support or recognition or inclusion in campus events, always frame it around what the advantages are to the campus. And at the same time, while it's advantageous to the campus, it is advantageous for the retirees. But you have to frame it this way to get the support generally that you're looking for. So,
Sue, if I can interrupt here, we
sure.
did have a comment from Aisha, who will ask her question.
Okay.
I was just curious if there was an AROHE Academy or an AROHE College you can name as an example, and then someone chatted with an answer, I guess. So are they like similar to what the extension does on campus here with providing activities and events and things like that?
There's a lot of overlap between AROHE colleges and retiree centers, and there are not very many AROHE colleges in the United States. Arizona State, that Bill Verdini is the past president of, is one very well-established AROHE college. Clemson University has one. Emory, University of Southern California. Those are the ones that come off the top of my head. And then there are smaller ones as well. And there's also kind of sometimes a morphing between centers and AROHE colleges. But in general, AROHE colleges have a more scholastic and research focus. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So then what is in it for the college or university? And these are just a few things that we ask you to keep in mind as you're framing your requests or interest in support. Increased philanthropic support. I'll talk a little bit more about all of these later. More volunteerism. Additional advocates and ambassadors for the university. Timely faculty and staff retirements. Valuable institutional memory and talent. These are all things that are of interest to the university and that the retirement organization can make a case for. If the university were to give increased support or recognition for retirees, there would be these types of advantages to the college or university. So our first tip, number 1, demonstrate retiree ROI, return on investment. And this is probably, of all of the tips we'll give you, the one that will give you the most bang for your buck, I would say, because there is a great return on investment to the university. Sometimes it is difficult to measure with the retirees, but I'm going to give you a few ideas of how this can be measured. First, ask your advancement or development department for retiree or AROHE giving totals. This can be difficult because many colleges and universities don't even know who their retirees are, or they don't, if they do know who the retirees are, they don't track their giving totals. So one of the things that an organization can do is to work with the advancement or development department to identify who the retirees are, because they're already giving on every college, university, campus. Retirees and AROHE generally are very generous philanthropic partners. But if the university doesn't identify them as retirees, then they're not aware of the amount of support they're giving to the university. Survey retirees and write reports of their contributions and accomplishments. I'm going to show a couple of examples of this in a moment that we've done at the University of California. And surveys can be very useful in terms of giving some data to the things that aren't as easy to measure. It's fairly easy to measure dollars of giving. It's not as easy to measure volunteer service, mentoring, all the kinds of things that retirees can do that are of a little bit of a softer nature. But a survey can help do this. Or write an annual report. A lot of organizations will write an annual report. It doesn't have to be a long, involved, multi-page document. Some organizations just do a front and back sheet with an infographic of their major accomplishments. And that can go a long way toward helping to put some metrics to your contributions to the university. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples from the University of California. So every 4 years, the University of California, system-wide, all 10 campuses, surveys its retirees. And they do this separately. They survey retired staff every 4 years and emeriti, retired faculty, every 3 years. And this is an infographic from the survey report for retired staff. The last report surveyed approximately 16,000 retirees. We only surveyed via email, so we surveyed those that we had email addresses for. And the greatest finding of the report was the level to which retirees provided community service, both for the community and for the university. And after the webinar, I will send you a link to the full report so that you can read it. But you can see by this infographic that there's a very high level of community service and volunteer service that retirees are providing. They also are very engaged in professional activities, including being involved in providing professional services or providing written works. They're receiving awards. 12% of our retirees have returned to work at UC because UC does allow its retirees to return to work part-time. And then let's look at the emeriti survey infographic. This was actually provided to me from Aisha from UCLA. This was data that was pulled from the system-wide survey, and just the UCLA survey data was then shared with the chancellor and other campus leaders on the UCLA campus. You can see the numbers are very impressive. 55% of respondents reported teaching undergraduate or graduate courses. 24% served as formal mentors and 56% as informal members. And 46% reported serving the campus on a department level. Scholarly activities, more than half have written or published journal articles, and 30% have been working on books. The last section here actually was not questions that we asked in the survey, but we went directly to the research department and to the advancement development office and received actual totals of research funding that emeriti have received in the last 3 years during the period of time that the survey covered. And you can see $156.9 million was generated in research funding by emeriti. 22.5 million given in gifts and pledges. You can bet that we tout these numbers far and wide with university leaders, because this is a metric that the university listens to and understands and appreciates. So it can be very helpful to do this kind of survey and collect this kind of data. Oops, I'm sorry, went too far. So I'm going to pause there for just a moment, and I'm going to ask if anyone has ideas that you can share with regard to demonstrating ROI. Are there other things that your organization has done to demonstrate ROI? And just type in the chat that you have an idea to share, or if you have a question, type in the chat that you have a question and Bill will unmute you.
Yes, you don't have to actually type the question. Just let me know you want to say something.
Correct. Thank you, Bill.
And there's Kelly. Let me unmute you. Go ahead, Kelly.
I was just wondering if you'll be able to share the actual questions that you were able to obtain information for these surveys.
Yes, I will be happy to. They are actually already on the websites for the organizations that conducted the surveys, so I will send those links out after the webinar.
And Craig. Oops.
Nope.
No, okay. Oh, there he is. Craig, I can read what you wrote. Comment on the value of surveying all retirees versus members of local alumni association.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, that's a good question. So this survey that we sent out surveyed all retirees for whom we had email addresses. So the University of California is a very big system. We have a total of 70,000 retirees approximately currently, but we only had email addresses for about 16,000 of them. So that was our survey population. But we sent the survey to all retirees, whether or not they were members of their associations. And one very interesting finding from the survey was that members of the associations volunteered for the university at twice the rate as non-members. So that was a really effective survey finding to show the value that the Retiree Association brings to the campus. And when I send the link to the full survey report, you'll read more details about that.
Let's see, Jeanette, are you on? I don't see. There you are.
I'm here.
Okay. You had a comment?
That has been extremely valuable, the survey. USC has also done a survey, but in terms of tooting your own horn, if there's a way to either put it in the the student or the school newsletter or something like that, that is really helpful. So that people pay more attention to you. One of the things that we've noticed also is that in addition to sort of tooting your own horn, our Retired Faculty Association, in conjunction with our Staff Retirement Association, has started doing distinguished lectures and inviting the students as well as current faculty and staff to join them. And so slowly what's happening is the faculty around campus are beginning to send their students and show up themselves to some of these timely lectures that include intergenerational Q&A afterwards. And it's not that difficult to do or set up. And so what it does is it increases the visibility and the value of your retirees. And we don't always have to have, you don't have to have a retiree speak. You can just highlight a faculty or even an administrator that's already on your own campus. And that's how they get to know you even better.
Great. Thank you, Jeanette.
I had a question from Brian.
Okay, this will be the last question for this section, and then we'll move on. We'll hopefully have time at the end too for more questions. Go ahead.
Brian, are you on
Go ahead,
now?
Brian.
Yes, well, my question is in the chat box, and that is, how often do these surveys tend to be done?
The Emeriti survey this is the 9th survey that's been done, and they do that every 3 years. They started doing it every 2 years, and then probably 6 years ago, they switched to every 3 years. The staff survey, this was the first time it had been done. It was published last year, and the organization plans to conduct the survey every 4 years.
Ronald, anything to add to that since you responded in the chat?
No? Okay. All right. Let's move on to tip number 2 then.
There were some other questions, but
okay, we'll hopefully have time for questions at the end, and then we also will invite people to continue the conversation via the discussion forum. Okay. With so many people on the webinar, we probably won't get to everybody's question today, but we'll do our best.
If you allow me to just read one because someone does not have a microphone.
Sure.
It says, their retiree center asks retirees about how much volunteering they do on campus. We take those hours and multiply them by the current value of volunteer time, which is about $25 an hour, and create a dollar value for retiree volunteering. That's
Great.
interesting.
That's an excellent idea. Anything you can measure and get metrics will be beneficial, and that's a great way to measure volunteerism. Thank you for sharing. All right, so tip number 2, this is kind of a funny little phrase, wiggle your way in. This is a phrase that was coined by my colleague at the University of Minnesota several years ago, John Adams. And John made the point that their association finds ways to become an integral part of campus life. So how can you contribute to the campus? And this varies by campus culture, it varies by your organization, so it's not going to be the same for everybody. But the important thing is to not just talk in general about how retirees can help, but to find specific opportunities and propose specific ways that retirees can contribute to the campus, and find ways to gently and kindly wiggle your way in. So I'm going to give a few examples here. And I should have mentioned earlier that all of my examples are going to be coming from UC Davis and UCLA because that's my work experience. We are large research institutions, and we've been lucky to be well funded for our retiree programs. But all of these ideas can be scaled down or across depending on the size or type of your university. So under wiggle your way in, facilitate retiree volunteers for high profile events and campus programs. This is a chance for you to partner with a variety of different campus departments. So for example, at Davis, at UC Davis, we had retirees helping with student move-in day. They would be stationed at high traffic areas around campus, providing directions to parents and students. Some of them were even helping move boxes. We have a similar retiree volunteer effort for the large campus open house every year. I did the same thing at UCLA with Bruin Day. At Davis, it was Picnic Day. At Davis, we had retirees partner with the Alumni Association because they did parent receptions every summer during new student orientation, and the retirees volunteered at the parent receptions, one to just meet and greet and schmooze with the parents, to pour wine for the wine tasting, and to serve olive oil for the olive oil tasting. And the parents absolutely loved it, and the Alumni Association loved it. It was just great ways for the retirees to contribute to the university. Those are just a few examples. You're going to have your own high profile events and campus programs, but if you can find ways to make retirees a part of that, the campus starts to see them as more of a valuable resource. Ask for retiree representation on task forces and committees. We did this more at UC Davis, and the chancellor at UC Davis had several advisory groups that advised her on campus parking, on curriculum, on disability awareness, on a variety of different topics. And there had never been retiree representation on those task forces in the past. So when I was the retiree center director, I contacted the chancellor's office and asked, not for every committee, but for the ones that made the most sense for retirees. Parking, because at UC Davis, retirees received free parking permits. And so, of course, they were concerned with the parking privileges, and for disability awareness, and there were a couple of others that aren't coming to my mind right now. But we were successful in getting retirees to have representation on those task forces. In fact, we were so successful that when sort of a controversial issue came up on campus and the chancellor appointed a task force to look into the issue, she actually appointed a retiree to be the chair of that task force as a result of us having retirees already on task forces and making contributions in that way. And partner with key campus departments. And in general, I've mentioned the departments that we partner with most often. Alumni affairs. We often will invite retirees to alumni events, and vice versa, invite alumni to retiree events. Human resources, we most often partner on pre-retirement planning classes, and retirees typically will serve as panelists in those classes, which the students love to hear from retirees about what has and hasn't worked in their retirement. Advancement, We partner with those departments to involve retirees in capital campaigns, for example, things of that nature. But there are many other departments you can partner with as well. Gerontology department, lifelong learning, campus recreation. One thing we did at UC Davis that was highly successful was partner with our campus recreation department to offer a class for people ages 50 and up. And it has become more than just an exercise class, it's become a community. And there's probably 70 or 80 people that regularly attend the class. They go to coffee afterwards. They have groups that have split off, the kayaking group and the hiking group and the biking group, and now they're traveling together around the world. So it has just been an incredible partnership that not only benefits the retirees, but also benefits the students that are teaching those classes, because they're often exercise physiology students and they're learning to work with a whole different population than the students that they usually teach in their classes. So I'm going to pause here again for a second, for a few minutes, and if anybody has ideas you would like to share on ways you've wiggled your way in, or if you have questions about this topic, please put it in the chat and Bill will unmute you.
Kim sent a note, not just unmuted. Kim, are you there?
Are you
Well, the
there?
comment, what?
Okay.
At Nebraska, retirees help out at commencement.
Oh, commencement is a great, and I did not mention that. Thank you, Kim, for mentioning that. Commencement is a perfect opportunity for retirees to help out. Thank you.
There was another question that will people be able to see your slide presentation, Sue?
Yes, we are recording this presentation and we will be sending you the link. You can share it with other people if you would like. You can review it yourself if you would like.
Looks like that's all.
Okay. Then the next tip, and thank you, Jeanette, for prefacing this a little bit. The next tip we have is toot your own horn. Because retirees are so often contributing in so many ways around the campus, but it's a little bit here and a little bit there. And without a retirement organization to really highlight those contributions, it sort of falls under the radar and the campus isn't aware of how much retirees are actually contributing. So we recommend that associations or centers or organizations really work to toot your own horn. And some ways to do that are to provide retiree stories and survey results, things like that, to media outlets. So perhaps your campus has a staff e-newsletter. At Davis, we had one that went out every other week via email to all staff and faculty. And I created a good relationship with the editor of that. So whenever I sent items from retirees, he always ran them. Perhaps larger departments on your campus will have their own departmental newsletters, and if you're doing things that might affect or contribute to that particular department, you might get them to do a feature story. We've had stories run in our alumni magazines before. That is great. And relatively new is social media. At UCLA, the Alumni Association has a person whose full-time job is to manage social media. It's a whole new world. And so the Retirees Association board met with that person and was able to create a nice partnership where she would put out messages from the Retirees Association via social media to the alumni when those messages were applicable to alumni. So that was a great partnership. There's also community and even national recognition that you can get depending on your initiatives. For example, the UC Emeriti survey that I mentioned earlier, the coordinator for that survey sent a story to the Chronicle of Higher Education, and we actually got a feature article about the survey in the Chronicle of Higher Education, which was a great coup for the University of California. So as much as you can provide stories to media outlets to help increase your visibility, it will go a long way toward tooting your own horn. Include retiree events on campus calendars and invite the campus community. And Jeanette mentioned this already, and I really appreciate that, Jeanette, because this was something we also did at UC Davis. It was very, very successful. So in the early years of my time as the Retiree Center Director there, we were struggling to get people to come to the monthly after lunch talks. Sometimes there would be very few people in the room. And we decided to open those events up to the entire campus community, not just to retirees. And it just became an incredible opportunity to have intergenerational and interdisciplinary interactions. It made the campus much more aware of what the Emeriti and Retirees Associations were doing. And it created some really special events. We had one in particular that I remember. It was a psychologist came and talked about infant development. And the title of the talk was "Babies Are So Human." And we opened it up to the campus community and didn't realize that this was going to make it to the breastfeeding mothers listserv. And so a whole group of young mothers came, some with their babies. And we had this just really remarkable interaction of young and old, all the way from infant to 90-year-olds in the room. And it just created a whole different atmosphere at the event. So I really encourage people to think, of course, there's some events where you'll just want those for retirees, but where it makes sense, start to include the campus community in your events, as well as wanting to be included in the campus's events. And then you can increase visibility and recognition by making presentation and participating in campus events. I mentioned already partnering with the Human Resources Department on preparing to retire presentations, which has been very successful for many retirement organizations. But both at Davis and at UCLA, we also participated in as many campus-wide informational events as we could, including wellness fairs, benefits fairs, travel fairs, small business fairs, staff appreciation luncheon, any place where large groups of faculty and staff would gather, we would try to have an informational table. Because what we have found is the more staff and faculty know about your retirement organization before retiring, the more they're likely to participate after they retire. They start to see how much fun you're having. They start to see how they can continue their relationship with the university in a different way. And I also tried to have something to hand out at those events. You know, you might have an organization brochure, but I also tried to do some fun things. Sometimes we would have mugs that we would give out. We'd do the little spinny wheel thing, which whenever you do a spinny wheel, you get a lot more people at your table. And I, at one point, got a retirement community to sponsor some luggage tags. So at the travel fair, we gave out luggage tags. And at the wellness fair one year, actually we did this for several years because it was so popular, we made up little packets of Miracle Anti-Aging tablets. And our Miracle Anti-Aging tablets were actually just jelly beans, and we put them in a little Ziploc baggie with a prescription label on it that said Miracle Anti-Aging tablets. Prescription: take 1 tablet daily followed by 30 minutes of exercise. And then on the back, we put a label that had information about our organization and our website. So it was fun, people laughed, and it was a great way to bring more recognition to our organization. So I'm going to pause here. And if anyone has ideas about how you've successfully tooted your own horn, or if you have questions, please note it in the chat and Bill will unmute you.
While I'm waiting to see if there are any questions in the chat, we did receive a note on the previous tip that retirees are voting members of campus governance organizations, and that was from Brian.
Oh, yes.
For example, Faculty Senate and Assembly. And I responded in the chat that at Arizona State University, for example, retirees can be staff or faculty. Faculty have an option to request emeritus status. If they're granted emeritus status, they have an option to join the Emeritus College. Of all those retirees, only members of the Emeritus College participate as voting members of the Academic Assembly.
Ah, okay.
Others do not. So.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point, and I did forget to mention one thing, that on many campuses, AROHE continued to be part of their academic senate. That's true at the University of California. They continue to be voting members, so thank you, Brian, for bringing that up. And what's often overlooked is a partnership with staff assembly. So often AROHE will continue with their governance in terms of AROHE, but staff don't necessarily do that. And so we have found great success in partnering with the staff assembly. If you have some kind of a staff governance organization, it's called staff assembly at the University of California. And we actually at Davis received a position, an ex officio position on the staff assembly board for a retiree, which was a great accomplishment.
We have
Anything else, Bill?
We have a comment, and I'll let her, if I can find. Oh, Arlene, you do not have a speaker.
She's on phone too, Bill.
Okay, so let me. I'll read her question, or her comment.
Okay.
Twice a year, we have a panel discussion called Life After CSUSM to invite those getting ready to retire to talk with retirees on how to prepare emotionally and what to expect. It's been a lot of fun, as well as surprising to hear fears about entering the unknown world of retirement.
Great idea. Thank you, Arlene.
And that's all.
Okay. All right. So number 4, find your champions. And the reason I say this is that every cause needs a champion, or 2 or 3 or 10. And what I have found often that retiree associations hear from the campus when they ask for more support, be it money to support retiree programs or possibly staff support, is there isn't money. You know, budgets are tight and it's not a high priority for the campus. And understandably, budgets are tight and it's always an issue. But in my experience, if we have even just one very high-level administrator that believes in the cause, funding often can be found. So we have some thoughts about how to find your champions. One is to recruit influential retirees for board or committees. And I'm sure all of you do this already. But one thing we found to be very successful is, depending on what our goals are, we might recruit different retirees that really fit in with that goal. And let me give you an example. At UC Davis, we were lucky to receive funding after 6 years of effort. I guess I shouldn't say lucky, but the Retirees and AROHE Association worked for 6 years to get funding for a campus-funded retiree center, and finally received funding to hire a director, but did not really receive space that was very good. So we ended up being in 3 different temporary offices over the course of 4 years. And really got to the point where we were really being stymied by not having a space for our retiree center. And so the primary goal for the year was to try to get space for the center. So the board went out and recruited the recently retired director of the space planning department to head up a space committee. And they wrote a formal proposal for space and went to the planning department and continued to push on that. It took another year, but we finally got an incredible space, of suite of offices right at the entrance to the Alumni Center. And I don't think that would have ever happened had we not recruited a recently retired director from the planning department. We felt like we really won the space lottery in the end, but that can be a great technique for reaching your goals, finding those influential retirees that are still respected and still well known, because it's much harder to say no to a friend. So if you have retirees that have friends in high places, you can go a long ways. Invite campus administrators to board meetings and or retiree events. I know that many organizations invite campus administrators, your chancellors and your provosts and your deans, to high-profile retiree events, and that can be very successful, so that they know what the retirees are doing and the great events that they are sponsoring. One thing that some organizations have started to do is to invite campus administrators also to meet with their boards on a regular basis. And when I say inviting them to the board meeting, it doesn't mean for them to sit through your entire agenda, but for administrators to be invited for maybe the first 30, 40 minutes to just meet the board. And these often are conversations where the campus administrator will share something about their department, about their current challenges, and then have just open discussion with the board about how retirees might be able to contribute to help. And this has done two things. One, it has made campus administrators much more aware of the possibilities of partnering with retirees on important campus initiatives, and it's made the boards much more engaged and interested and knowledgeable about the challenges that are facing the campus. So I highly recommend that organizations consider this. I'll give you an example from UC Davis about how this was successful. Your best champion for any campus, if you can get the support of your chancellor or your president, obviously that's the best. If you're not quite there yet, you start at whatever level you can start at to start to create your champions and to get people on your side. So the Maritime Association board at UC Davis didn't think they could get the chancellor to come to their board meetings, so they didn't invite her. They started with a few different deans and some campus department chairs, and then they went to the provost, and they all came and they participated in the board meetings. Well, after about a year, I got an email from the chancellor's office asking if she could attend the board meeting. She was feeling a little left out of the party. So it was a great example for us to, don't think that you can't get your chancellor or your president on board. And the chancellor ended up coming back to meet with the board 3 different times over the course of a year and a half. So this can be a very powerful way to find your champions on the campus. And lastly, partner with a campus affiliated or community organization. So I already talked about partnering with campus departments, which can be very beneficial to the retirees. But also look beyond just campus departments to campus affiliated organizations. For example, at UC Davis, the Alumni Association, which I already mentioned, but we also have the University Farm Circle, we have the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, we have the Davis Senior Center, all sorts of different organizations that serve essentially the same population or similar populations. We've created some wonderful partnerships with them and worked together on a variety of programs to increase our support. The more support you have in all different levels, the better off you will be in terms of finding your champions. So I'll pause there, Bill, and see if anybody has ideas to share or questions about this point.
Nothing yet, but I'll wait for some chats. And
Okay. I'll give it just a second here. If not, I'll move on.
Aisha mentioned earlier about how UCLA is embracing the age-friendly university initiative as well.
Oh, thank you, Aisha. Do you want to say a little more about that, Aisha? Because that is a great example of partnering with a large organization, an international organization.
Yes, so the Age-Friendly University is has a few international people. I believe it's based out of London or England somewhere.
Dublin, Ireland.
Dublin, right. And there's only a few campuses in America. So we're one, USC is one, I believe Cal State, Fullerton or Long Beach may be one, and
ASU is also.
ASU, okay. And then, so I've just had, some meetings with the Associate Vice Provost here about the Healthy Campus Initiative to sort of combine the two. We have a Eat Well and Breathe Well pods that go on campus. So I said, what about an Age Well pod? Not just for older students, but older staff and faculty. People change so much in their entire career on campus, whether they're a freshman or a grad student. So we just had a preliminary meeting, and I told her, like, I've been here for 6 months, so let me do this on a marathon scale, not a sprint. So we have another follow-up meeting coming up to see now that we are an age-friendly university, what that really means, what initiatives can be actually created, and are there measurable standards that we can have to show that UCLA is age-friendly. USC does a great job of their website, so I have another follow-up meeting with USC and their cohorts about just how do we give value to being age-friendly. What does that really mean? So it's very, very small seeds I'm planting, but hopefully in the next few months and future years, there'll be more programs that we can develop, if it's research or policies or procedures that can be age-friendly.
Great. Wonderful example. Thank you. And for those who are interested, Age Friendly has a website. I don't know exactly what it is, but you could Google Age Friendly Initiative and find their website.
Ronald asked a question about partnering with OSHR and the Lifelong Learning Institute, and Alec described something they have recently done at Boston College. And Alec, I have you now on.
Yes, well, we've recently partnered with the Lifelong Learning Department in the Provost's office. We're going to be providing speakers for their events. And we're talking about the possibility of that developing into mini courses that would be offered by retired faculty.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
And Jeanette has mentioned reaching out to high schools. If I can, there you go. Jeanette, you're on.
This is Jeanette. I have been posting to Jessica only, not to everyone, so I'm sorry. The few things that we've done is we have high school students in the neighborhood. So we've gone into the neighborhood, and we're also bringing them to USC for college prep and helping them with their essays. We've been partnering with physical therapy for workshops, and we've been partnering with pharmacy for individual consultations for retirees. So I just can't say enough about partnering, but also inviting the campus community and the local community, because you can connect current faculty and staff as well as retirees to support civic engagement. And the SUNY system does this really well. And the more we can do this in small ways, the better.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jeanette. Okay.
Okay, that was, I think that's all.
Okay, so our last point, we have to toot our own horn a little bit, is to talk about the services that AROHE provides that you can take part in. First, I will point out that this is our brand new logo for AROHE. You are the first people to see it. We will be launching it along with a new website at the end of this month, but we wanted to incorporate it into this presentation. So the things I'm going to talk about today that are available on the website, you probably want to wait until the end of the month. We will be sending out an email because we are revamping the website so that it will be a little more user-friendly for folks. So first is our discussion forum. Now, the discussion forum we have not really been promoting very much in recent years, but we are going to start promoting it a little bit more as soon as we launch the new website. This is an opportunity for you to pose topics to other AROHE members and get answers via email. You do need to subscribe to the discussion forum. So after the webinar, I'll be sending out the link to do that. I will ask that we start some discussions around this topic because I know there were questions and ideas that probably didn't get shared today that we'll want to continue on with. So once we send the link out at the end of the month for the new discussion forum, I'll start a couple of topics. Maybe each of our 4 first topics that we talked about. We'll start a new one each week and continue the discussion around that. I encourage everybody to participate in that. We also have online resources. Now, we're in the process of still building these pages, but what we're trying to get is for our member organizations to share resources with other members. We have some on the website now. We will continue to ask for more. When the new website launches, we'll be trying to build up those pages so that we can help one another. None of us should be reinventing the wheel, because we're all basically doing the same or similar things, and we can save ourselves hours of work by sharing resources with one another. So we'll be sending more information out about that. As part of our resources, we have several AROHE briefs, and there are several more under development. 3 of the briefs go into more detail about the 3 different types of retirement organizations: associations, centers, and emeriti colleges. And then we have several other briefs as well. Once we launch the new website, we'll be sending out links to those briefs. Webinars, we hope to continue. Hopefully this has been helpful for you, and we will continue the webinars on at least a quarterly basis. Once I end the webinar today, I will be sending out an evaluation in the next couple of hours with links to some of the things we talked about today, as well as a link to an evaluation. So please fill out that evaluation. It asks for topics that you would like to see for future webinars, and also an evaluation of today's webinar. Since this is our first one, we really want to get feedback so that we can improve webinars for the future. And our conference, I'm going to let Bill tell you a little bit about our upcoming conference in the fall of 2020.
Yes, our last conference in 2018 was at Emory in Atlanta. We had a wonderful event where lots of new people came. The next biennial conference in 2020 will be held in Tempe, Arizona, hosted by the Emeritus College at Arizona State University. And that will be October 18 through 20, about a year from today, as a matter of fact. And we are close to making it official. It will be at the Tempe Mission Palms Hotel. So if you're curious about what that looks like, you can take a look at Tempe Mission Palms. It's a lovely spot. We'll also have a chance to tour Mirabella, which is one of the retirement communities located on campus that's integrated with campus. So residents of Mirabella will actually have campus IDs and library cards and permission to sit in classes and the like. So that'll be a wonderful thing. So mark your calendars and watch for our notes for the next conference.
Great, thank you, Bill. And then lastly, for those who are really wanting to move to the next level and are interested in fee-based consulting services, AROHE does offer fee-based consulting services. Details will be on our new website when it launches. I've recently worked with the University of California at Riverside, who had struggled for many years trying to get funding for a retiree center, and I worked with them and did a site visit where I did a presentation to their provost and their chancellor and several other key campus leaders, and they retirees and emeriti associations were happy to report that as a direct result of that consultation visit, they have received funding for a part-time center director and will be opening their retiree center. We're also working with New York University now on a consulting agreement. So I encourage you, if you're really wanting to move to another level, that you consider AROHE's consulting services. So one last pause for additional ideas to share or questions that you have before we finish today. Go ahead and note in the chat if you would like to share anything or ask any additional questions.
Now I could unmute everybody and allow it to be a free-for-all since we're near the end.
We could try that, sure. We could try that.
Let me see if that works.
Let's see what happens. We'll just go rogue. Bill's going to go rogue on me. Anybody have anything they would like to share or ask?
Kim just sent a little note to all of us saying this has been very helpful. Thanks.
Good.
But now,
Anything else? If not, I'll just finish up here.
okay.
Okay. So the last point I want to make is that what we're really talking about here is a culture change. It's identifying retirees as important constituencies on the campus. It's having the institution recognize and appreciate retirees and respect retirees, and having retirees appreciate and respect and recognize the campus. And like all culture changes, every culture change starts with small steps, and every culture change takes time. So I encourage you to go back to your organizations. Like I said, you can share this presentation with them, either by summarizing it or by watching the video in your board meetings, whatever you might want to do, and talk about what your primary goals are and what steps can you take to improve the recognition or support of retirees on your campus. I'm going to give you one last example before I end today about how culture changed at UC Davis. So when I started as the Retiree Center Director, we had a chancellor who had been on campus for 30 years. He had started as a professor and spent his whole career at UC Davis. He was, let's go ahead and mute everybody again, Bill.
Okay.
Good. He was very supportive.
Now you have to take yourself off.
Okay, Bill muted me. When Bill mutes everybody, he mutes me. This is something we have to learn about doing these. So when I started, as I was saying, the chancellor who had been on campus for 30 years was very supportive of retirees. He came to all of our events. He was the one that provided funding to establish our retiree center, and then he retired. And a new chancellor came on who had never worked at a campus where retirees were included or recognized or valued, who didn't really know anything about the organization or the retiree center. And we found that we really had to start over completely with educating and including her and doing all the things we needed to do from the very beginning to establish retirees. One of the things I did, among many things we did in our championing process with the new chancellor, was to work with her speechwriter, because whenever I went to convocation and she would stand up and she would thank and recognize everybody in attendance, including the students, she would thank the parents, she would thank the alumni, the faculty and staff, the friends and donors, and I kept waiting for her to thank the retired faculty and staff, who there were many in attendance at convocation, but they were never recognized. And so I started working with her speechwriter, and it took 2 years, but that last time I went to convocation and she thanked and recognized our students, our staff, our faculty, our alumni, our parents, our donors, and our retired faculty and staff. I felt like I wanted to throw my hands up in the air and say, my job is done here. Finally, we've created the culture change that we've worked so hard to do. So that's what we're trying to do. I encourage all of you to continue in your very good work and to hopefully use these ideas and come up with your own and continue to share with other AROHE members. So thank you for participating, everyone, and I hope to see you at future webinars.